Picture, if you will, the coastal fog, thick as muslin, clinging to the cypress knees, and into that mist steps Miss Bette Davis, a woman child who declared herself a Yankee, a straight shot of cold New England brine, yet whose star power burned hottest when she wore the mantles of the South. She was a grand, terrible paradox. She could summon the formidable, desperate beauty of a Julie Marsden in Jezebel, that silver-tongued harridan, or the shadowed, crumbling gentility of Charlotte Hollis, forever haunted in that moldering grand house. She didn't merely play Southern women. She unleashed 'em, gave 'em a dark, beating heart of ambition and ruin. They'd tried to cage her, bless their hearts, but Miss Bette had no interest in small perches. She was a force of nature, unburdened by the custom of a bitten tongue. She moved through Hollywood, that great, sun-drenched yet deeply segregated landscape, like a hurricane in satin. If she saw a wall, she didn't tiptoe. She placed a hand upon it and pushed until it groaned and fell. This temperament made her a headache for the studio titans, the men who liked their stars pliable and quiet. But for those who needed a champion, she was a fierce ally, her loyalty an oak tree in the storm. Now listen to the low humming rhythm of the earth beneath the stage where Miss Hattie McDaniel stood. She was a woman of generous shape and even more generous spirit, yet her career was a narrow, hard road paved with the expectations of others. When she stepped before the microphone, receiving the Oscar for Gone with the Wind, she wore the crown of Mammy, the faithful, formidable servant. It was a role given in chains, but she wore it like silk and iron. It is a tragedy to recall how few paths lay open for a black woman of her gifts. Servants, maids, mammies, these were the bounds. But Hattie, God bless her, was a sculptor. She took those stereotypical roles, those figures meant to stand meekly in the shadow of white drama, and poured into them a boundless dignity and power. She gave them an ancestral memory and a depth of feeling that the screenplays never earned. She made them the emotional center of every scene. When critics, sometimes even those within her own community, scolded her for taking these roles, for not refusing the hand she was dealt, she had a retort as smooth and final as Riverstone. She said she'd rather play a maid on screen for $7 a day than be one in real life for $7 a week. She understood the quiet, grinding economics of survival, and she worked the system with grace and a knowledge of her own worth. This story comes to its heart during the World War II, when Hollywood, that massive engine of dream and distraction, organized the USO shows. They sent their brightest, their loveliest to the battlefronts to give the fighting men a taste of home. But listen now and hear the silence where the music ought to have been. The curtains lifted for the white boys, but for the black servicemen, for the sailors and the soldiers who served a country that did not yet fully serve them, the tents remained dark. They were shunted to separate, forgotten bases, denied the simple comfort of a star's handshake. Miss Hattie McDaniel, who understood being overlooked in a way few others did, would not tolerate it. She went to the generals, to the USO brass, and she demanded that these men be entertained. It was her conviction, her quiet storm, that brought the lights. And it was rare, oh so rare, for the white stars to volunteer their labor to the colored shows. They feared the gossip, the backlash, the loss of bookings in the segregated South. But when Miss Bette Davis learned of the gap, when she saw Hattie's determined effort, she didn't hesitate. She threw her lot in, the Yankee and the Mammy. The two women, formidable, determined, and utterly unconcerned with the small minds that feared their fellowship, joined forces. The impact was a thing to behold. When these stars, particularly a talent as great as Miss Bette, stepped onto a stage for an entirely black audience, it was more than entertainment. It was a defiance of segregation, spoken not in laws or protests, but in the blinding, shared language of the spotlight. It was an affirmation, a recognition, a moment when those overlooked troops could see, right there on the dusty stage, the grand, shimmering future they were fighting for. A single, integrated bow. That was a promise.